I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Mailfuss TV. I am Peter and I'm going to talk about Person of Interest Season 1 Episode 19. It is called Flesh and Blood. So full spoilers for the episode. And this is the next big chapter in the Elias story. It gets personal for Agent Carter. I always do that. Detective Carter, right? Stupid. I even like any of the Agent Carter stuff that much in Marvel, but the title is ingrained into my brain. But we have Elias back. We got some flashbacks for Elias even. And we have some Jeopardy, and we got 5 mafia bosses that are up for assassination. So a lot going on this episode. It feels like a big one for the season in terms of the overall plot. Obviously, Carter's not been answering calls from John or Finch. She has been unwilling to work with them after what happened in the baby episode. But obviously that baby episode served a really good purpose actually now for this episode, and not only because the Carter trust thing has to be built back up, but because when Elias eventually has Carter's teenage son kidnapped, we understand how far he's willing to go. We kind of feel, even if we don't think, we're convinced Reese is going to save him, because it would be a very, very dark episode and a very dark turning point for the character of Carter if her son was killed by Elias, and she'd probably gone some sort of revenge rampage or something, which isn't out of the question to make go down that route, but there's still less likely the options. But even with that in mind, you still feel the danger and why she should be scared of what Elias might do. And it only makes the fact that she doesn't give in to Elias's demands immediately as soon as she knows her son's kidnapped and he makes his demands all the more impressive, all the more respectable for her character. You kind of like respect that she doesn't just give in, even though she's clearly terrified that he might do something to her son. So all that stuff is good. Let me start off though with the flashbacks for Elias, which show him as a kid after he's been in a fight at school because someone called him a bastard because he couldn't do his family tree. And then later when he's in his late teens and he meets Moretti for the first time, and then Moretti sends him, or has him go out with some men to kill him in the woods just to get rid of his mistake, as it were. I will say first up, one negative of the episode is that the kid actor playing young Elias in the first flashback is pretty bad. He's pretty rough. It's not a big deal. It's one relatively short scene, but it's not, it's not good. Obviously, I would have almost recommended that you didn't even need to have this scene. Like, the other flashbacks kind of operate without it. They kind of work as their own little two-parter later on. However, the one thing that comes up here is that he get into a fight because someone called him a bastard, which does come back up in the final flashback when he's about to be potentially killed by 2 of Moretti's men. One of them refers to him as a little bastard, and you can kind of tell that in the moment, like, that's when his attitude and demeanor kind of changes. Like, any fear he might have had kind of turns to strength because he's willing to fight again. So it's actually a very smart little bit of writing, because I was ready to say for most of the episode that first flashback you could get rid of, but that little link back to it was actually quite good. So fair play. So it's just a shame that the kid's acting in that first scene is not very good, but it's not a big deal. It is what it is. He's a kid actor. He's in one scene. We can live with it and move on. But yeah, so you get the sense that Moretti tried to pretend that he'd keep him around and that he'd be not a father figure per se, but he wouldn't, he'd let him be a part of the organization. Maybe Elias would have a future, but of course he immediately turns around and tries to have him killed, seemingly at the very first opportunity. It's like 1991. These, like, the later 2 flashbacks take place when he's a teenager. The first flashback is in the early 80s. I think I had something else I wanted to say about when one of these flashbacks took place, and I've forgotten what it was now, which is annoying. But something did occur to me during that first flashback. But regardless, that's the backstory here, which obviously ties into the fact that we see Elias with Moretti this episode. He's got him cooped up somewhere. It's like a distillery or something like that. There's a lot of barrels of things kicking around. Elias is going to kill like 5 mafia bosses in New York and take control of the city in this episode. So lo and behold, Finch and Reese get 5 numbers from the machine, and it's these 5 mafia bosses, and it's like, okay, how do you protect 5 people at the same time, especially when it's 5 mafia bosses who aren't exactly going to be helpless and go, oh yes, I need help, please help me. They're going to resist help. They're going to tell him to get lost, and that kind of, very quickly, two of them die quite early on. The first one's in a car explosion, which I will say, minor nitpick, is very, very telegraphed that the car's about to blow up because of the shot of the car like behind John, like as he's walking away. They frame it in a way that just feels really obvious that it's about to blow up. It's a minor nitpick, really, but it's something that stuck out in the moment. That's most of like my negatives of the kid actor in this little moment are pretty much my only negatives of the episode, though. It's got a lot of intrigue. The actual mafia boss characters are just kind of whatever. They're there to serve their purpose in the plot. They have one or two little moments later which are kind of important for our main characters, but by and large they're the MacGuffin of the episode and what the other characters are running around trying to deal with. And Carter is tracking that they're in trouble via other means. She gets information about bank accounts and stuff, and after the death of the first mafia boss, she's trying to reach out to them, protect them as well. So she's kind of working on the same thing as Reese and Finch, and it's only when the second mafia guy that Carter's with at the time gets shot, and then Reese kind of comes in and saves her, where she kind of begrudgingly has to accept that she's kind of working with Reese and Finch on this. She takes a bag of weapons from Reese, who wants to make sure she's prepared for any situations in case he's not there. But, they're looking after these other mafia bosses. There's three left, one of whom is Moretti's legitimate son, who's an actor I recognize, actually. What's his name here? Let me find him. Paul Schulz. I recently saw him in, of all things, I saw him in Mimic 2, the direct-to-video sequel for Mimic. It's not good. Definitely don't watch it. It's just something I had to review for a Patreon show, so anyway, but he's been in, like, he's got one of those faces. He's done a lot of bit parts and tons of things, this actor. But there's a lot of interesting things that come from this, because like Carter basically kidnaps the last three mafia bosses at gunpoint, to which Finch says that she's maybe learned a few things from Reese. I actually got a chuckle here, because so Finch directs Carter to a safe house, and Carter's brought Fusco with her, right? So it's because a lot of the other cops have proved unreliable. A lot of the cops that came with her to the first mafia boss guy, second in the episode, but the one that she was with, they all kind of disappear, barring one uniformed cop. The rest of them all just disappear, so they're probably all being told to skedaddle by HR. So she can't feel that she can trust any other police officers, but she kind of accepts Fusco might be okay. That's put into question a little bit later, but she's with Fusco, they've got the three mafia guys, and Finch directs her to a safe house, a place that he owns, and they sort of set up camp there for a bit. And I got a good laugh, because Elias is on the phone to Carter. She sort of says, like, something to the effect, like, I mean, what do you expect me to do, just off these three mafia bosses myself? And Elias responds with, if you're up to it, that would be a really big help. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting that, and it really made me laugh. That line, if you're up to it, that would be a huge help, really got a pop out of me. So that was good stuff. Obviously, they made a point of introducing, or reintroducing, I should say, Carter's son at the start of the episode. They made a point of having a scene with them where she's dropping him off at school, and the school's even where he's abducted by the corrupt cop, the one with a scar. Scarface, as I am going to call him. In fact, that's what he's actually credited as. So I wasn't just making that up. He is Scarface. But I think when you see that scene early on, you're like, okay, there's no way they're just putting him in here at the start for no reason. Like, something's going to happen involving him later. Even if it's as simple as he's there at the end of the episode after Carter's went through, they've put him at the start because he's going to be involved in something later. And of course it ends up being this abduction. And like I said, because of the whole baby episode, you feel like Elias means his threats, and maybe he's being honest that he doesn't want to do it, but we know he's willing to. We know he will go to lengths, and that's kind of the big thing here. This stuff's all very entertaining. It's all these big standoffs. Reese, as soon as Carter's son is taken, is like, okay. And he even figures it out. Because he's following a bunch of the HR guys, because all of them are being tailed and like surveyed themselves by people who work for Elias. So it's the idea that Elias is, he's not even following the HR men, he's following the families of the people who are in HR. The idea being that he's got leverage and he's going to threaten or possibly even just kill their families if the HR guys ever don't do what he says. So he's playing really malicious even with them who are supposed to be his allies that are in bed with him. And this is a big deal this episode and has some big ramifications. But it's at this point where Reese kind of has the idea, wait a minute, is there any of Elias's men that were tracking via their phones near this high school? And, that's what gets all this stuff with Carter's son in motion. Taylor gets kidnapped, and Reese promises Carter that he's going to get him back, that nothing will happen to him, and that he's going to be there. And it feels like, this is the sort of thing that needed to happen with them. Obviously, they're working together kind of anyway. This episode, because they've kind of been thrown together, because they were both looking into the same thing. But him saving her son feels like such a personal, big thing that any doubt she had about them being good guys, about them doing the right thing, about them being some force for good, I think she gets over a lot of that because of this. This wins back a lot of her favor. Ultimately, she's obviously going to feel indebted to them, or at the very least respect them a lot in a ways that she perhaps didn't before. When he actually goes to save the kid, and he has some fights here, there's some fun stuff where they're shooting each other through the barrels. Ultimately, Scarface gets away, but Reese takes Taylor ultimately to his mom after everything else goes down, and it's kind of it's a very happy ending to the episode by and large. Hell, even Elias gets a happy ending despite the fact that he gets arrested. Not in his prison cell, though. I'm not making a lewd joke. Keep that out of your minds. So when they're having the big standoff and Elias comes with his men to try and get into where Carter is, they find him because one of the mafia bosses is actually working with Elias and is turned on the other ones, and he eventually reveals himself. He also implicates Fusco as being a dirty cop in front of Carter, which obviously, it makes her worry that she can't even trust the one cop that's there with her, even though I think we, the audience at this point, believe he is on the up and up with her, and he's trying to do everything he can to actually help her in this situation. It does put a little bit of doubt, and there's a moment when they're having the standoff when the gangster's pulled out his gun, where Fusco's got his gun pointed at him, and the gangster tries to talk to Fusco and say, hey, put your gun down, and protect your future, side with us, we know you're dirty, you can be with us. And he never does, though. He keeps his gun up, and even if there was some doubts put in Carter's mind, he's also done something in front of her now to maybe at least show that either it wasn't true in the first place, or he's changed, or at the very least there's lines that he's not crossing. Like, whatever it may be, she's seen something in front of her now to at least buy him a little bit of time. And that's not to say that I don't think she might have a problem when she does find out real things that he's done, when it turns out that it's confirmed that he's been a dirty cop and he's done these bad things. I'm sure that'll still be a problem for her, but at least now there's a bit of reasonable doubt to not just instantly turn on him and not instantly kind of like pariah him effectively. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And Elias gets in, but they have the big standoff and they refuse to. And because at this point Finch has made this big gamble. He's made this big power play where he goes to Simmons. I don't even know what this character's name was before. This is the HR cop who we've seen throughout the season talking to Fusco mainly. Finch goes and talks to him, which was a ballsy move. This is Finch putting himself in front of someone who can now recognize him, and not an ally. This isn't like being in front of Carter or even Fusco. This is someone who outright is a bad guy, currently. But he's like, hey, I know about Elias, I know you're part of HR, I know all these things. Here's some photographs of Elias's men watching the families of your cops, including Simmons' family, including his. And basically says, look, this is where it's going to go. He's going to betray you at some point. He's going to... You're not working with him. You're being controlled by him. But ultimately says HR needs to sever ties with Elias. This is how they find Taylor, actually, if I remember. But not only is this how they find where Taylor's being kept through Simmons, this also means that HR is not protecting Elias anymore. So towards the end of the episode, during the standoff, a bunch of cops show up at the crime scene, and Fusco says he called in backup. Now, whether or not Fusco knew when he called in backup that Finch had intervened and sort of made sure HR would be on their side come the eventual, standoff, I don't know. Or if Fusco just took the risk and it just so happens that Finch has thrown this wrench into HR and now HR is not playing ball with Elias. Clearly, Elias still has some allies because there's that prison guard that gives him his phone at the end, which he uses to call Moretti. Because obviously, Moretti gets saved along with Taylor because he happens to just be there. And then him and his son get blown up in the car at the end of the episode anyway, showing that Elias still has a lot of power even though he's now in prison. You know, we get a whole montage of him getting his fingerprints taken and getting his photo taken and being thrown into the jail cell, but he still kills his father that he hates from behind bars. Despite the orange suit, but despite being behind the bars, he still looks like he's the most powerful man in the city in a lot of ways. So I don't think this is the end of Elias. I don't think we're done with him. It seems like he's going to be very powerful even from this situation that he's now in. Interesting stuff. So there's a lot of big ramifications that come out of this. HR is still very much a thing, and they're probably still going to want Fusco to be in with them, or think that he's in with them, but they are not working with Elias anymore, which maybe makes them less relevant to bigger plots for a little bit. I'm sure it'll be a factor again at some point, but maybe in the immediate future, we won't be dealing as much with HR, but it kind of just depends on what other things we're doing, I suppose. For all I know, the entire next 2 episodes could all be HR focused because now it's all unraveling or something. I have absolutely no idea. No idea. Yeah, it was a fun episode. Like, obviously, it feels like a big deal. It feels like there's a lot of big things happening. I feel like I've barely talking about Reese, and I think it's just because Reese, while he's there a lot in this episode, he's constantly getting into fights and shooting bad guys and trying to protect people. He's not really the plot focus. I mean, Carter absolutely has the biggest emotional connection and drama this episode. Fusco has a nice couple of moments because he's kind of accused of being something in front of Carter and kind of tries to prove himself that he's not that. Those are great moments, I think. Finch has a couple of great little lines with the others. Actually, sweet little moment that I loved is before Reese goes in to get Taylor, right? He's getting ready, he's got his gun out. Finch sort of stumbles and apologizes that he's not very useful in this type of situation. And he picks up a handgun and he says, okay, show me how to shoot this and maybe I can help and make a distraction or something. And Reese just kind of puts his hand down and says, no, like, I appreciate it. You can be the getaway driver. I've got this. I hate when people mess with kids. And that's something we've seen before in the show. But I loved this because it was Finch wanting to be involved. And he's obviously he's gotten involved in lots of other ways throughout the season, and he's obviously got a conscience which is driving his entire motivation for everything. But it was actually kind of sweet, especially since it was someone connected to someone they know and have kind of befriended. Not that her and Carter are on coffee date status or anything, but this idea that it's not only an innocent kid, but it's someone related to who they know, and it'll have ramifications that they'll see the effect of. This idea that Finch wanted to pick up a gun and help in the situation, as hopeless as he would be, was kind of, and I don't mean this in a diminishing way. It was adorable. It was adorable, and it sells the stakes that he wants to help, and it makes you really appreciate who he is. But ultimately Reese is like, no, you're not that. I'm that. I'll go deal with the violence. You wait here. But yeah, all of that's good stuff. But it is interesting now that Carter's son even knows that, hey, Mum works with these 2 guys who are very not policemen. They're very outside the system. So yeah, Carter does tell Reese that the FBI's got a task force on him. He barely reacts to it, to be honest. He's not super worried. I'm sure it's going to be more of a big deal in the coming episodes, but they've got bigger fish to fry in the more immediate future of this episode, I suppose. But yeah, I really like that scene with Finch wanting to try and help. As hopeless as he would be, it was very endearing for the character. So I think in a lot of ways this episode did at least a little bit for all 4 main characters. Reese, Finch, Carter, and Fusco. All of them came out with just reasons to like them a bit more. Maybe Reese the least, because we've already seen him wanting to play hero when a kid's in danger, and it was an even bigger deal. It focused a lot more on him when it was the baby, right? Or when he was protecting the younger teenager in the Ronin episode. He's had these types of story before, so with him it's kind of I wouldn't say a diminishing return, but we've covered the ground with him before. But I think all the other characters all got notable things. Carter the most, but certainly Fusco and Finch got their fair share of moments where, by the end of this, and maybe this is very intentional, get into what's probably going to be some of the more tense episodes of the season, because we're going to hit the last little stretch of stories. That, hey, we want the audience to root for and like these characters the most they possibly can, get into the big end game of the season, and that's probably quite smart. So, well, there you go. That's my thoughts on Person of Interest. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps me out a lot if you do. Helps more people find the channel, and if you like the content, it's only good for it to reach a bigger audience, to just be more and more worth doing. Of course, you can support even more directly by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting for any amount per month. Anything helps, and you get some bonuses at the various tiers. A lot of the movie podcasts have bonuses. The movie podcast you can find over in MailFuzz Movies, and I just recently started doing monthly Columbo reviews as a Patreon/YouTube member bonus. So if you're interested in that, then check out. But that is the show. So thank you very much for watching. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?